So was my grandmother.
All right, you're live. Okay, great. Welcome, everybody.
Kitty hawk.
Okay, welcome, everybody. It is Friday, April 18th, I think. And you're in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. And today we're going to continue. I just want to point out to committee members, we have the final list of our priorities that we sent to Senate appropriations yesterday. It's on, I believe it's going to be on our website if it isn't already. And it is, I think, should be a template for the other committees to send their priorities to the committee, because it sorts it by subject area that each of the committee members is responsible for, and it sorts it by our priorities.
Are you going to present in Senate appropriations?
I'm hoping to, and I have certainly given it to Richie and Andy, and it's been emailed to them all and to Pat Brennan. So everybody has it at this point, and I just wasn't able to catch Andy before we started today. So that's the next step. But I think Thomas did such great work. He's not here to hear this, but
I just hope we're prepared when our
yeah,
great work is cast aside in some
our great, given what's happening both in state and with our federal, not sure they're partners anymore, and with the federal government, we may have to pivot, and all of this may not be able to be prioritized, because we may have to be filling holes that are essential life support. So in our government budget, in our state budget, if the feds cut Medicaid in a significant way, or any other major program that we have to fill.
I think the value of this now is that I will just say for myself, like if someone comes and says, but they oh, my baby monitor's on, if they cut it or they did this, like this is our work, it's done, appropriations is being, badgered in a lot of directions, and we shouldn't sort of advocate for one.
I have responded when I've been asked.
Yeah.
So I'm there as a resource, and Andy knows, so does Rich, and so does Pat.
Yeah, they're under significant pressure.
They're under a lot of pressure. So we are, I am hoping, so turning to housing, we are going to try and finish up the differences, and we'll finish up addressing the differences between the House housing bill and our housing bill in the next several days. And I am hoping our Senate bill will be the bill that survives when we put them two together, because it is going to take the longest time in the House with Chick. So I'm hoping that we're meeting today at some point to discuss some of that, and the chip in the House. And so we will bring these bills together at some point soon, and I'm hoping it's brought together and that we'll pass the House version back to them, and they'll incorporate it into their bill. That's my hope at the moment. So we'll see how that plays out. To that end, we have some areas of H 479 that we really need to clear on, and then on I'd like to be able next week to go through the side by sides we have, and check off what we're okay with, what we want to change, how, and really do a significant, the work on fixing what we may want to fix, or changing, and maybe not fixing it for word, but changing. So with that,
Doing up three hats upstairs.
oh my Lord, look at that. Who is that from? Oh, great. So comments, your ears should have been burning, because we all are so appreciative of this work. And I think it should be a template for other committees, because it's pretty great.
I could do more improvements I'd like to make.
Yeah, I know. And it really, using you is a great.
I think it's a phenomenal effort.
It was a terrific effort, wasn't it? It was great.
We volunteered you to do the same thing for everybody.
It's not me out. Whole play.
Sorry. So, watch out.
I would encourage you to do a probes instead of
So, we're going to first address
Did you use, I just sent another link.
Okay.
Try the one I just sent you. Maybe you had
Okay.
yesterday.
So first, in our housing bill, we're gonna address the, VHIP differences. And we have Sean, thank you very much for coming to join us. We appreciate it. So we'll just have you come join Cam when we, if you'd like. But first, let's just walk through the differences and then we can discuss them. And then we're gonna talk with James Tischler about the, land bank, piece, which Cam's gonna walk through first, then we'll have James weigh in. And, hopefully we'll be able to appreciate the differences and maybe we could even make some decisions on this now. So do you have,
Yes,
are
ma'am.
you all set?
Yes, ma'am. Ready to go?
Great. And how are you wanting to do this? Should you just walk through them? Or
Yeah, I'll
wanting
pull up
to
the
share
side by
your screen?
side. I'll share my screen. I'll pull up the side by side and just look because the differences between at least in VHIP, if we're starting there this morning, the differences are relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
So, give me 1 second. Heidi, I was asking to share.
All right.
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. Okay, and so this is the side by side that you have, draft 2.2. So this is as passed version, not as introduced version.
Yeah.
This is what,
Good.
H 479 on the left. That's 127 that you all passed on the right. So the highlight here on the left is something that I would probably advocate including.
Yeah.
So to recall, this is in subsection A, creation of the VHIP program, and it has where the department cooperates and subgrants funds to others who then give, loan out the money to the landlords, to the businesses to do the work. So this is adding in some language saying for purposes of doing these loans, these entities are not considered financial institutions subject to Vermont's landlord lender. There was just a clarification. I don't remember exactly when it came in, but just to add in, just to try to be as explicitly clear as we can that for purposes of carrying out the provisions of this section, they're not licensed. So that just didn't make it in the Senate version. My recommendation would be to carry that over.
So we could probably just check this off now. Are we okay with that?
So really the primary difference is here on page 2 of this side by side. And as you can see, it's kind of highlighted in the Senate version, where the Senate version is kind of tracks with the administration's proposal of removing the 5-year forgivable loans. So I've kind of mentioned this a few times in the committee, but just as a reminder, technically right now there are 3 options that a landlord or somebody doing this work can take. You can do a grant, you can do a 5-year forgivable loan, or you could do a 10-year forgivable loan. Those are your options. If you do a grant or a 5-year forgivable loan, you are then subject to the requirements of those provisions for 5 years, where you have to rent the unit to someone who's exiting homelessness, somebody who's working with a refugee resettlement, etc. Or you can get a 10-year forgivable loan. And as you recall, the amendments further down here are to remove the requirements that you rent those units to someone among those populations. And instead, we're going back to what the language used to be, where you would rent that unit for fair market rent. Your version is removing the 5-year forgivable loan option. So you're either getting a grant, in which case those requirements apply for 5 years, or you're getting a 10-year forgivable loan. This really kind of
10-year forgivable loan.
those requirements would apply for 10 years.
Correct.
And so this is really going back to how the program was initially designed. When the program was first created by this body in 2022, Sean, please jump in and correct me if I'm getting any of this incorrect. In 2022, when this program was first created, there was no time limit on these things. It was just, there were 2 options. You got a grant or you got a forgivable loan. If you got a grant, then these requirements apply for 5 years. If you got a loan, these requirements apply for 10 years. That was it. There was no distinction of 5-year loan versus 10-year loan. Throughout its life cycle, ultimately, the legislature added these distinctions of 5-year, 10-year. I actually think it was last year that they were added.
Right. Is
And
it really only 3 years we've had this program? I feel like it's been an age.
It feels like an age to me too. So the program, and forgive me for the record, Sean Gilpin, Director of the Housing Division at the Department of Housing and Community Development. The program was instituted in statute in 2022. We've actually been running a similar program with
Yeah, so-
ARPA funds since 2020, since
Yeah,
September.
I feel like that feels much more, as long as I've been talking about vacant, blighted, or non-code compliant.
Yes.
Got it, so memorized. Okay, so the key difference here is that the house did,
so the key difference is the house is keeping the 5-year forgivable loan option. With that, they are also requiring, so I'm scrolling down to page 4 on this side by side. They are requiring, or they have put in a requirement that annually the department set aside a minimum amount of funding to go to the grants for 5-year forgivable loans. Again, the key differences here are, as you all recall, and this is in both versions here, under the 10-year program, 10-year forgivable loans, last year, the same requirements that applied to the grants was added to the 10-year forgivable loan. So as you can see, all this language that's being struck. Current law requires that if you have a 10-year forgivable loan, if you have a 10-year forgivable loan, you have to, landlord shall lease the unit to a household that is exiting homelessness, actively working with an immigrant or refugee resettlement, one individual has a disability eligible to receive Medicaid. All of those requirements apply to the grants, and they were added to the 10-year loans last year.
are you under one?
I'm under 2A, kind of this
Right,
language,
2A, but,
all this language is being struck out.
right.
Because the proposal now is, because that was added just last year. So the proposal now is to go back to what it was previous to that, which is for these 10-year forgivable loans to allow the landlord to rent for fair market rent.
If they take a loan, and there's no
If they take a loan.
expectation that they would take anyone exiting homelessness, even for 5 years.
They're required to accept vouchers. But other than that, they're just required to rent the unit per
So
fair
the
market rent
grant-
established by that. The grant
The
still
grant
keeps,
requires those exiting homelessness for 5 years.
correct. And that is all still remaining. And that is how the program was, as a general statement, that is how the program was originally
And
designed.
fair market value, the fair market rent isn't market rent.
Correct,
It is a HUD determined
correct.
area median income rent. Which is also, okay.
I
So
don't think it's tied to area median income, but it is tied to a specific percentage of rents within a given area. I don't remember what that
a
percentage is.
market,
off
what they
the-
call,
off the
so on
top.
a
Is it
market,
30%?
It's the 60th percentile. 60th.
so all housing at this moment in our lives is good housing. Any new units, right? So it is the feeling that the grant is sort of like a carrot, you get done sooner and is this right, Sean? I mean,
Certainly.
and there are no strings attached. And-
So,
Yeah.
would you like me to?
Yeah, why don't you
step up?
come up and join Cam? And we'll keep Cam's screen, but have this conversation.
And another level of magnification.
Yes.
Screen.
So hello again, Sean Gilpin. Basically, I mean, Cam was correct, and technically there's 3. We've kind of thought of it as 2 different paths. 10 years of affordability, at what the HUD fair market rents. A good way to think of it is that's the maximum amount that a Section 8 housing choice voucher holder can pay. That's the threshold. So basically 10 years of renting at a rate that is available for somebody with a housing choice voucher. or a 5-year option. So yes, a shorter compliance period, but a higher expectation that somebody, that the tenant is exiting homelessness
Or
or a
recovering from
refugee.
some natural disaster.
Yes, yes. So that is
That would
being
be-
added. Yeah.
So the House version, kind of bring us back to what we're discussing, the House version has the same change here where under the forgivable loans that apply for 10 years, they're allowing the landlord to lease those spaces for fair market rent here.
Got
But
it.
what they are requiring is the department annually has to establish a minimum, I'm in the sub G here highlighted on the left. Annually, the department has to establish a minimum allocation set aside for the grants and 5-year loans for that program.
And they haven't specified a percent of whatever.
It's a minimum of 30%.
Ah.
And this is right here, the last sentence on that sub G1, the set aside shall be a minimum of 30%.
Oh, there it is.
And then the department, has to consult with the Agency of Human Services on certain factors to determine whether it should be greater than 30%, and it has to be set annually. And then the last thing I'll mention in the engineer's question, the last thing I'll mention is if the funds aren't used after a year, they've set aside a certain amount, they don't get used within the first year, they then can be used for any option.
So I have no question.
Yeah, tons.
That was my question.
So those are, that's kind of there's a
And the,
after
Say that
a
one
year,
again.
so it's here, it's this sub 4 here. Funds set aside that are not utilized after 1 year shall become available for the 10-year forgivable loan option.
Okay, great.
Still ask a question. Then, so based on uptake so far, do you have reason to believe that people won't consume that 30%?
So we, to date, because of the nature of, the COVID crisis and our priorities and the funding, we've only allowed for the 5-year until this past program year. The concern was that once the 10-year option became available, that nobody would avail themselves of the homeless service provision. We've not found that to be the case yet. It actually is pretty close to a 30 to 35% uptake on the 5-year, but there were concerns in some of the other committees and with some of our partners that this would ultimately cease to be any contributor to the homeless provision. So we agreed to have that set aside so that we can ensure that there's an option, that it's not all eaten up by 10 years, but we don't want to end up sitting on a pot of money if people aren't volunteering to take on the 5-year. And just to finish that thought, one of our concerns is that we have a bit of a bottleneck with ability to pay in vouchers and connecting that and services to people so we actually are finding that folks who have committed to 5 years of service to people exiting homelessness can't actually find a tenant that matches that unit. In which case we provide a waiver and we have somebody come off of the Vermont State Housing Authority Section 8 wait list. We work with other organizations to do that, but the concern is that this is definitely a unit creation program with an affordability aspect. It's definitely not a homeless rehousing program fundamentally.
The housing language seems fine to me. It sort of protects the first come, first serve with somebody soaking up all the money and not leaving it for some of this other program. So seems reasonable.
But is 30% near what you're experiencing now on utilization of the program for?
Right, for this program year, yes. Yes.
That hate to set aside money, then have to wait a year to actually utilize it because job uptake.
I agree. And how do you feel about, I mean,
As of last week, for what we're calling VHIP 2.0, so the
right,
latest
which is what we
funds that
saw
we're
last
using-
year.
Yeah, we've seen 35% of the funds that have been granted have gone to the 5-year. So we think 30% is a reasonable, once word gets out, because we haven't had to do any advertising for this program, I think once.
Oh, no, the word of mouth on this program
Word
is
of
bad.
mouth, about the 10-year option goes out, I think we will have to be a little selective. It is not a first come, first serve program. It is competitive. We allow the homeownership centers that we work through to consider applications based on the need in their regions. I think that's a really strong part of the program. But yes, I think the 30% is probably about right, and we're happy to collaborate with our other stakeholders to make sure that
Right, and we can always
fluctuate on.
revisit it, next year if you're finding it's not working.
So if it's not first come, first served, how long does a landlord have to wait to go into the pool of applicants to be considered as a awardee?
Sure. When we have funds, and again, this has been one-time funded several times, so it's admittedly been a bit of a roller coaster in terms of
Which
fund
is why, just
availability.
remind everybody, we asked for base funding for this.
When applications come in, I think they're typically handled within 6 weeks or less.
It's pretty speedy.
Okay, so but by the end of 6 weeks, whoever is adjudicating who gets the awards, it's within 6 weeks, or it's 6 weeks and then they start their process?
Oh, no, within 6 weeks, an agreement is made and that project moves. Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
My hesitation was, you started the year, first part of the year, applications all go into a pool, they get considered. Again, you said not first come, first served, so they're getting considered. I didn't want to delay that a whole half a year or 3/4 of a year waiting for someone to make a decision, to wait for the pool to fill up.
Yeah, no, we, our goal is expediency, and that's, yeah.
So, and just to remind us, do you in the VHIP office make those choices, or do the 5 home ownership centers, when the people apply to the 5, because I assume they're applying to their local home ownership agency,
Yes,
that they make the decision?
correct.
Okay, that's what I
Yes,
thought.
so it's made on a regional basis, unless, of course, there are questions about an application, which happens more than you'd expect after running this program this long. And they reach out to us and we can make a determination based on that.
But they make recommendations to you and then you make the final decision?
Yes, and that happens in a handful of cases. By and large, I mean, more than 90% of these decisions are being made by the local home ownership.
By our 5.
Correct.
So given the 5 agencies, how do you determine who gets what percentage of the total?
We ask them to, so we collaborate with them on a regular basis. We have bi-weekly meet, every other week we meet. When money is available, we look at what the applications have been for the last rounds, assess the needs, and then they request from us a certain amount that they think that they can handle. They're also, have limited staff, so there's only so many applications they can keep track of. And this is this is a handful of the program, because there are multiple site visits, multiple inspections. We're often dealing with I won't say unsophisticated, but not professional landlords and property owners. So they take that into account, how many they can actually manage. And then so far we've been able to fulfill pretty much all of the grantees. We also consider regional disparities and the like.
And how far into the fiscal year do you go before your program's saturated and funds are obligated?
Honestly, we probably have enough people in the queue right now that we could spend what's being proposed in the current appropriation in short order.
That's what I'm an advocate of, like doubling and tripling the hit because of the instant impact, low cost,
The
return
quick
on
impact.
investment.
Yeah. Oh,
And
Nothing's instant.
yeah,
chocolate.
we do see, I think, the average time from application approval to project completion is about 9 months.
That's great. Wow, I had not heard that.
We allow for 18 months. All program applications need to commit to being able to complete within that 18 months, with the caveat we've allowed for an extension on a couple, usually because of contractor situations, life circumstances, the like. I can probably count on both hands the number of those extensions we've done, but by and large, it's between 9 and 12.
So 9 to 18 months from application to completion. On average, I mean,
From a completed application. So assuming they get all the information in on the project.
from a completed application to completion of project, 9
To
days.
lease up, yep,
9 days.
9 to 18 months, yes.
That's great. And just to remind everybody, the average award is about 38,000. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. The average public investment, and bear in mind, we're seeing private matching of funds
Oh, yeah.
to the tune of more, we require a minimum of 20% match. We're probably seeing more like 110% match. I mean, these grants or loans are going to that sort of marginal, they're closing that gap with the marginal
So-
cost.
Just other than home share, which is the lowest bang for the buck. This is our lowest, our biggest bang for the buck that we can, in terms of bringing units. And would you say of these units that the range is from a studio apartment to 1 bedroom, or do you see bigger than 1 bedrooms or
Oh,
whole
yeah.
houses? Yeah.
We allow for a grant of up to $30,000 or anything, up to 3 bedrooms or, and then up to 50,000 if you do 3 or more bedrooms or a brand new unit. And that can be new construction in a small building or conversion
Or
of,
an ADU, which is
or an
often.
or an accessory dwelling unit, yes. Or conversion of commercial space. We've done a couple of those. We've had sugar shacks be converted into
Garage
we've had
apartment, or just-
barns, garages, yeah, where it's an infill development that's supposed to have a low impact on the.
No, we're so proud of this program. We feel
And-
like we have part ownership. of it.
So you absolutely should be proud and definitely have some pride of ownership. And we actually part of one of my colleagues, Erin Aguayo, who's in the deep on the front lines of this. She's getting calls probably every other week from another state or municipality in another state, everywhere from Juneau to Tallahassee. We
We have imitators.
Yes,
Yes, imitation is the most profound form of flattery. So
indeed.
this is great. So what are people feeling about this change? Sorry, Kate.
Just two other
Yeah,
quick things quickly. One is I just want to highlight something that I noticed as I was kind of reviewing this language recently. This is something that was in both the House and Senate version, and I think it was just a slight oversight, if you will. I've had a conversation with Sean about this. They're in the 10-year program. There is currently a requirement here under 3A that says a landlord shall accept any housing voucher that are available to pay all or a portion of the tenant's rent and utilities. That language has existed from the beginning of the program, at least in statute,
Yes, ooh, that got struck.
and it got struck. I think it's just oversight, and my recommendation to you all would be to keep it. And speaking with Sean, it's
Reinstate.
landlords cannot discriminate against individuals with housing vouchers. So it's kind of legally, it's
Right.
probably not required, but I think it's probably best to keep it to ensure that you are providing clear direction to individuals who take advantage of the program that you are required to do this.
I would recommend that we keep that and check that off and reinstate that. How do people feel about accepting the House's language on this 30%? If the department's fine with it, I'm fine with it, and it answers the major House concern in human services,
Yes.
which they will. I think it's fair to say this is a big issue for the House.
Yes, it is.
What if, though, you're at the point in your distribution of funds and you only have 20% applicants and you're early in the fiscal year, you said you run out of funds, pretty quick, this program goes quick. Can we maybe trigger something a little more rapidly than have to wait until the next fiscal year to make use of those unobligated funds? I mean, if you don't have a pool of people who want to utilize that 30%, let's go. Let's
So,
use the remaining,
would
even if
you-
it's 8% or
We did
whatever.
that with some of the business programs.
Yeah, we have, so would that be a time trigger, like by April, if the year end is June 30th? if there was a trigger that by April or, you know, sometime 2 or 3 months before you were at the end of the year and there were funds left, how would we structure that? I mean, it strikes me you'd probably need a time frame within if things hadn't been obligated.
Right, we, naturally, most of our activity happens during, you know, the warmer weather, months. Although not all of it by any stretch, a lot of this is rehabilitating existing structures so you can work through the winter. Yeah, I think April would be a reasonable time for us to.
If we could construct, I think a fair point, David. And that would mean it wouldn't build up and we could use things and green light projects between April and the end of June. If things hadn't, and it would encourage people to make decisions sooner. Pam, do you think we could construct something that
It would just be shortening this condition. You could say funds set aside that are not utilized after 10 months shall become available. The sort of a language piece for me, a language change is not difficult.
and leave April, May and June, that's 3 months.
It's 9, so.
Yeah,
so
9
9
months. Yeah.
Then you're guaranteed to fully obligate all those fiscal year.
And we can get it out the door faster.
And then you start the next thing.
Yeah.
I think given the crisis we're in, this is a good idea.
The last thing I'll mention
We'll
is.
call it the weeks provision. Not that it is a week provision.
Well, Stephen
But that-
Bach's provision.
The last thing I will mention here is just because we're discussing the differences is the House has this annual report.
Yeah.
And so it is,
Don't you already do an annual report to us?
We do not. We report quarterly on our website who has received funding, where, and to what amount. And that's.
So it would just be combining those quarterly reports. It's not a big deal.
No, we.
Okay, great. I think just while we're in this crisis, which will be in for the next 10 or 15 years, I think, that makes some sense. Okay. Are we okay with that, everybody?
And we, for what it's worth, we actually have been working with Agency of Digital Services. Huge shout out to Naomi Cunningham, another team member of mine who, we now have, it's about to go live, a Power BI, format on our website where you can go and see an interactive, map of where things are, statistics about, what's going where. And, I'm shocked that, things that I really wished for when I first started this job are finally coming to pass in terms of the technology of being able to keep and collect and report on that data. So, yeah.
We saw an interactive map
Yeah.
here, and can somebody remind me, was it for VHIP?
No,
It
that
was
was
from-
probably broader. There's a much broader effort that's going on.
Well, you remember we saw it and it was in Barry and that they were doing the,
I think that's the overall house units.
that was great. So how are people
The last
feeling?
thing, just
Oh,
for you
fine.
committee, just the last thing, and just to make sure, if you're going with the kind of house language of keeping the 5-year program and not striking that, I presume that the committee would like to keep the language that you propose to add. So these are the populations that must be served under a grant or a 5-year forgivable loan. So again,
Yes,
homelessness, refugees. So this committee recommended adding displaced due to activity related to climate change or due to a natural disaster.
Can I comment, just an observation? So natural disaster is pretty clear cut. I mean, if we suffer a storm or what have you, but climate change is a little ambiguous and I'm not quite sure. I think the two are actually intertwined, but how do we determine if a climate change, if an occurrence is a climate change issue or not?
Just looking at this and thinking,
let's just say.
are we gonna
natural
take out the words climate change?
Right.
On merit, I agree with you. It's the same thing came up when we were talking about flood activity versus water damage. It's, I think maybe I would leave it in Cameron's hands if natural disaster would stand alone, but we did have this issue before with insurance. And it's hard, even if you said flood damage, what about you know, you had Anne Cummings was on this committee and she had like a soggy
Oh,
field or, you know, so I'd leave it in Karen's hands, but I agree with you. And I think the whole thing needs to be replaced with the kind of displacement we're talking about because someone's home is uninhabitable due to weather and precipitation. And
Could we not just strike to climate change or do and just go for related to a natural disaster, and that would cover any?
I still worry about that enough to ask Cameron and Sean to noodle on it.
Okay,
It could be due to a federally declared natural disaster.
That's what I was gonna say, real quick, Sean, from a language perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, you can strike, you know, and just keep it displaced due to a
Right.
natural disaster. If you all do not define that, it's then going to be up to the department to define what that means. So they would be able to restrict that to say, we're only gonna support if it's a, you know, federally declared natural disaster, et cetera. You could add that in if you wanted to clarify that, but then I've run into this with a separate bill regarding VITA and a disaster
Right.
fund that they are creating. There was discussion about not all disasters are going to rise to the level of a
right.
federally declared
so
disaster.
why don't you two noodle it and come back to us with something for next week for a look at?
Certainly.
That'd be great. Great, and but just it also then in addition, the last piece of this language under little I on page 5. This reinstates the 5-year
Under
loan.
5, the little I is just creating it as a revolving fund. Presumably, and I will probably leave this to Sean to kind of comment, 'cause this was recommendation from the administration. Presumably, they're not getting money back because it's either a grant or a forgivable loan. However, it is conceivable that a landlord decides, I'm done with meeting the requirements here,
and the
and
experience.
We have not allowed it, but that has been the experience. Usually it's a change in life circumstance, or I need to sell the building, I need to bring my mom back in, or something like that.
Yeah, things happen.
I've done 5 years, can I pay back, you know, a portion and
And so it's conceivable that it could happen. So this would keep those funds in that program and eligible to then be loaned back out or granted back out.
Right.
But.
Yeah.
So in little I, what's the purpose of the first sentence? Why can't it just start with funds repaid or returned? Essentially returns.
Creation sentence?
Yeah.
That's
Does
just
it really need to be a revolving fund, or do the funds need to just be returned into the overall fund for utilization? I mean, why does it have to be called a revolving fund? That's got a completely different concept.
understood. That right there is simply a heading for the section. So if you, that's a drafting style thing for us. So, you know, G has a heading there. You know, requirements for 10-year forgivable loans. So because there are headings in the other subsections, there has to be a heading for this. And I'm actually noticing that there isn't one here for J, and there should be. So it doesn't have to be called a revolving fund. You know, it could be creation of the Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program Fund and leave it at that. There's not going to be a lot of money coming back, so it's not revolving. And I think the
not really
sense
revolving,
that
it's
you
just
would,
return.
right. And so I'm not wed to keeping that. If you want to strike it because it makes more sense, I think that makes more sense to me as
Okay.
well. So I'm okay with that. Or I wouldn't have a concern with that.
So that is the end of the VHIP piece. Given that we have a few minutes before, I want to turn to James Tischler, who's joining us from Michigan on Zoom, and just to talk about the land bank section. So you two are going to work on language. I think it sounds like we're okay with the rest of the changes.
Sounds
Becky,
great.
we're going to be about 5 minutes later than expected, because we're going to just discuss the land bank.
And I would, if there's an opportunity, I'd love to speak to the land bank. after
Great,
that.
stay right where you are, because James, welcome. Cam.
Morning, happy Friday.
Hi, happy Friday. Jim, let's just quickly introduce ourselves so that you have a notion of who we are. This is the Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs Committee in Vermont. Thomas?
I'm Chittenden, I represent Chittenden Southeast Quadrants.
Keisha Robinson, same district.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor District.
Randy Rock, Franklin, and Northern Grand Isle.
Good morning, Dave Weeks, Rutland County.
Great. And Jim, we welcome you. Kate Lally, I believe, is the person who suggested that we speak with you on the land bank issue, but Cameron, can you just tee us up on land banks? What section? And what are we considering with land banks? Encouraging towns to develop them.
So, on the
The side by side section. Oh, and Jim has a.
Alright. So this is on your side by side, it's page 14, so it's section 7 of page 479. So it starts in the bottom of page 14 on that side by side, but it would require on or before November 1st, the Department of Housing and Community Development to issue a report to these respective committees, including this one, to include proposed legislative language specific to the creation of a statewide land bank, the authorization of regional or municipal land banks, and the identification of funding proposals to support the sustainability of each separate model. The report shall include an analysis on which option, the creation of a statewide land bank or the authorization of regional or municipal land banks, best serves the interest of Vermont communities. So there was a report issued by the department earlier this year, talking about the positives of creating land banks and how they can, support development of housing, development of properties, etc. I believe that was in response to a requirement that was issued last year. The report.
I think from
We've had a study on land banks for like 3 years. And
yeah.
The report didn't include any specific kind of legislative proposal about how to then enact said policy. And so the House General Committee wanted the department to continue to work on this and come back next year with specific legislative language about how to do this, kind of reviewing what the options are. There was discussion about, is it best to have this be a statewide entity? Is it best to allow certain regional entities to create their own? Some currently exist. And so wanting the department to come back with specifics on that topic. So that is what you have here.
it costs no money and you guys are okay doing it.
So, we're very, nothing's off the table right now in our housing crisis in terms of, potential solutions. I don't want to, steal Jim's thunder here. We're happy to continue investigating this. I have some concerns about the timeline, but happy to
So
chat about
let's chat about that after we hear from Jim, because we have our timeline today.
Yeah.
Jim, welcome. It's good to
Yes.
have you. Just be kind of introduce yourself and.
Yeah, sure thing. Appreciate your time today. It's an honor to appear before the committee. I am a native Michigander, but I do have a past history in Vermont. 15 years ago, I was a city planner in St. Albans. And I was involved with St. Albans center application. I knew the staff back then. I have met and know Sean, Chris Cochran, and the team at DHCD. And I was also involved with the Designation Centers Reform project from a few years ago as well. So I've got a history a little bit with Vermont, and I understand some of the context you're there. For the past almost 10 years, actually, since I came back from Vermont back to Michigan at the invitation of the governor here, I've been involved in policy development in the state. And for the last 8 years, I've been running development operations at the state land bank. In Michigan, the land bank was organized as a public body corporate under statute in 2003. Michigan is one of 4 states that have a structure of a state land bank and authority for locals, be it local land banks or local units governments, to work with that land bank. By the way, I did submit a 4-page slide package for you. Yeah, but in the interest of time, I'm interested more to kind of talk with you orally about this, because you can use that as reference. I know you're pressed here, right? Exactly, that's correct. Yep. And what I'm going to summarize is what's there. There are 18 states that have authorized through enabling legislation land banking through various structures. As I mentioned, Michigan is one of 4 that have set up a state structure. 25 states actually have land banking going, but the difference between the 2 numbers is that in the other states that haven't authorized.
Jim, hold on a second.
Yep.
2 steps back. What's a land?
What's a land bank? Good, great question. Okay, so a land bank is a public or quasi-public entity, depending upon how it's structured, which repurposes contaminated, blighted, obsolete, functionally problematic and distressed properties that have bad title. They fill a gap from property in decline or property that has trouble or problems from abandonment, dereliction, and blight to get to productive reuse. In every community, I suspect, you can identify one or more properties which fit that condition. The land bank movement rose because government had no way of addressing those situations until about 25 years ago, when some of the larger urban cities in the Northeast and Midwest began to experiment on getting control of those properties and going through title review and title control and title clearance and then redevelopment. That has grown into what we know today as the land bank movement. So
Jim, can I just clarify that this is a more productive title than eminent domain, but it, right? In some ways, I mean, it serves a similar purpose.
Yes, different states have have provided different authority for these organizations, these land banks, to attain title to property. In my state, Michigan, our statute provides the ability of a land bank, us or local land banks, to undertake what's known as an expedited quiet title process, which is above and beyond the normal quiet title process that any other property owner would make available. And the reason is because of the public purpose of moving properties to productive reuse to benefit everybody.
Can I want to give credit to Peter Tucker and the Realtors Association as well, because I mean, I had known of this in Michigan and New Orleans and, you know, places where blight was bringing everybody else's, you know, neighborhood value down. And then Peter had a really wonderful, I don't know if she's Stafford.
Elizabeth, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Who wrote a whole report about them. I can try to, we can
Yeah.
forward it to people. It's still incredibly relevant because we haven't done anything. And
You
David Hall, I think David Hall was the last to say, here are the choices about how you could structure it. So I just don't want anyone to do work that's already been done.
Right.
But I'm glad we're talking to you, Jim, because I think Michigan's structure is really strong and functional, and maybe we just decide
To copy it.
I'm gonna.
I think is what we're. Right.
Yeah, I thank you for that comment, and I want to follow on that. Off of what I shared with you, my assessment for you to consider, and based on my experience, is that land banking is a great, as excellent, can provide productive results, including housing development. We can chat about that in a few moments. But what's most important, I think, is that it's really a function of capacity. All right, and my experience in your state over a couple of years is not too different than my experience of what we do now today in the rural parts of Michigan. Michigan is 3 different economies: Southern Michigan, manufacturing, auto. You will see that on the media. Northern Michigan is lumber and and natural resource. That's more like the Northeast, northern part of Vermont. And the UP of Michigan is more like the Northeast Kingdom. Okay, so you've got these areas where you have a lower or not a lot of capacity, budget, or personnel capacity to actually execute what are necessarily or appropriately good functions of government to support communities, individuals, and households. So the structure in Michigan was designed to allow for the state to provide support to locals through the state land bank to help them move their properties to productive reuse at their interest or at their request. Your bill identifies a process to evaluate the structure as the senator just mentioned, and that I think is really wise to do. Looking at a state structure vis-a-vis a local structure.
Yeah.
In rural areas without capacity, in my opinion, is that there will be a need for a state involvement to support those projects and those communities.
Thank you, Jim. Not unlike Michigan, we also, as you know, have a huge diversity of capacity in this state, by region in large measure.
Right.
So
my last slide, if you want to reference that, is talking about in the analysis to come, I suspect there'll be a discussion about what roles a state level land bank could play. I'm presenting to you in that slide and that information the 5 categories where we operate right now. First, and this is actually not looking at locals, is first is that you as a state have surplus state-owned properties likely. How do those properties get disposed or moved to productive use if the state no longer has them? That's a function here in my state that we are first and foremost tapped as an agent of the state to actually get control of properties and then move them to productive reuse through cooperative partnerships, solicitations with the private market to move. So that's a first area. Second area is working with properties that are in our inventory. Every state is different. We take properties in a few counties through tax foreclosure. We also have through environmental or other police enforcement actions of various levels of government. Environmentally, most of the time, we take title to properties that have been acquired from other properties because of it's a big brownfield site, for example, and such. So we have an inventory of about 2,600 properties across the state, and we're moving to put those to productive reuse. Next is.
Sorry, how many properties
2,600
statewide?
statewide, correct. Now, that's just us. There's the local land bank network across Michigan, which has their own inventories as well. I guess, Michigan is probably, in terms of population, roughly 20 times the size of Vermont. So you can kind of put that into perspective. It helps you understand. Okay, so now the third area is being that technical tactical consultant to either local land bank network.
Jim, sorry, David has a question.
Does that
Oh, sure,
second,
yeah.
does that second category include properties that you take in via eminent domain?
It does not. We are prohibited under our constitution in Michigan. We cannot use eminent domain to take control of properties for repurposing development purposes. It's limited only to transportation and other public use projects in our state.
So your reclaiming of property is via like brownfield scenarios only?
Correct. Or other activities where the government comes in because there is a need to take title control of the property to protect for a public health, welfare, or safety issue. Okay.
Right.
Environmental or other police action.
Or you buy them at tax sale, I thought you said, at foreclosure.
Well, yes, they come, right, correct. They can also come into us through our tax foreclosure process. We have a foreclosure process, not a tax sale process. That changed over for us about 25 years ago. But again, every state's different. Well, I understand, you're different than us in terms of how you actually deal with delinquent taxes and property control.
Jim, just while we're on that, I have two questions for you right away at the beginning of this process. Who identifies the properties for you? And what was your initial funding source? What gave you the cash to actually begin this work?
Yeah. Generally, we identify the properties or ourselves and reach out, or other governmental parties or even private individuals contact us. We have an excellent relationship with our county and local community and local land bank network. It's a network. That's the best way to describe it. And we've spent 20 years building that network to let all those parties know, and they let us know that we can play a role to help them either in a short-term or ongoing basis for land control to help them move it to productive reuse.
Right.
I forgot the second question you just asked. Can you ask that
Second
again?
question was, what did you fund? How was the initial bank, as it were, funded?
Yeah, the legislature it gave us back in 2003. The legislature gave the land bank an appropriation of approximately $2 million. But the way they did it was they transferred two significantly large parcels of land that the state owned and authorized the state land bank to put those properties up to sale, which generated the $2 million in value.
Very smart.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I think it's nice that you could go shopping, but what did you go shopping with?
Right. The discussion of funding, I've seen the language in the bill will be coming up as part of this report if this bill gets signed into law. I'll be frank with you all. There needs to be a dedicated funding source that's provided to make land banking work. In this state,
what is your dedicated funding source?
It's two sources in Michigan. One source is what is that when a land bank sells its property to a non-exempt owner, meaning a non-governmental owner, a tax-paying entity, then for the following 5 years, 1/2 of the property tax is diverted and goes back to the land bank to remunerate them. Okay, we call that the 50% for 5 years funding mechanism. But that happens on land transaction. So it doesn't really cover the opportunity of the prep work necessary to move property for productive use. Therefore, Michigan wisely made any property owned by or controlled by a land bank an eligible property for project-based tax increment financing, which I'm aware there's another bill being considered by the legislature about project-based TIF in Vermont.
Passed by this committee to the House.
Okay. In Michigan, those two tools are connected. And the reason they're connected is because then it gives a land bank the ability to actually move ahead, move proactively with a property to do all the steps necessary for its development, redevelopment, due care, whatever's necessary to be done for business, housing, activities, excuse me, and generate an additional source to underwrite their development preparation activities, in addition to the sale proceeds and the tax capture from that, the taxes on that. So there's an inherent network connectivity between project-based TIF and land banking. If I'm asked, and I know that the department has asked me to help them if they do engage this report, I will be a strong advocate for that because I see the benefits every day in this state. It is providing dozens, if not hundreds, of new housing units right now across Michigan.
Great. That's exciting. And so, sorry, just to finish, because before we turn to Becky in 3 minutes, just to finish your slide, it is so I guess I'd love to know, because we're always talking about our return on investment. You have in the 22 years of existence, you've developed what pool of money are we talking about, and how many distressed properties have you been able to clean up and make productive again?
So I'll have to give you, I could go back to my reports and we could provide that information to you.
If you'd be kind enough to send that to us, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to my staff on that. But in a quick summary for you, in my guesstimation, we would be in the at least 500 properties put to productive reuse, to the tune of at least 8 digits in the millions of dollars in valuation, across all different land uses, not just housing, commercial, industrial, or even recreational. We have actually moved properties into natural conservancies. We're actively involved right now with 2 natural conservancies in northern Michigan to combine housing and natural systems preservation. And the job creation is easily in the hundreds.
No, I see all that. And David has a question for you. I think what we're also hearing, the other figure would be great, is the amount that's been brought onto the grand list that was, creating new value for the grand list.
Okay, I'll have to come back to you on that, but we can make a good estimate based upon our annual.
That would be terrific, because that is in addition to creating housing, we also care about bringing more onto our grand list. David.
So, great testimony, great topic. I'm wondering, Jim, how long it took you on average. I think the goal is to return property back into the market for reuse. How long did properties stay in your possession in the land bank before coming back? And did you experience, God help us, a profit where you gained a property, sold it back in the market, made a profit, be kind of a self-perpetuating program?
Yeah, good questions. So on timing, or on the timeline, it's dependent on whether the project is a development project, meaning that there's not extraordinary costs or actions attached to. And we do have those properties. Those usually take 2 to 3 years to move to repurposing, closing, and putting back into title ownership in a private market party. If it's a redevelopment project, meaning that we're engaging in due diligence, due care, title work, others like that, that's a longer time frame. That could take, in my opinion, anywhere between 5 years or longer. And some properties are in our inventory for a long time. Sidebar, some of the biggest, baddest brownfields in Michigan are permanently in our inventory because there is no other owner that wants to have that property and they're so badly contaminated, the state is the last repository. So that, so it can run to that short time frame out, so we can see a kind of a long tail in terms of the time frame on that.
David,
Okay.
last question, and then
So just a comment. So recognizing that they don't really use eminent domain, I think that their program seems to be pretty much focused on brownfields, returning
Yeah.
brownfields back. I would submit, and maybe in the form of a question, Jim, if you were to be allowed to do eminent domain, how quickly could that cycle of gaining the property and then reintroducing it to the market without having to do brownfield mitigations? From your experience, how long would that process take?
You're about a 5-year period.
5 years
yeah, it's a
without brownfield, just to move a property, like gain a property and then put it back on the
yeah, because
market?
eminent domain is a court process sometimes.
Okay.
You've got to get site control, and then you've got to actually go through the local permitting process, whatever that permitting process is.
Right.
Well, in addition to having a developer on board and such. Now, again, you guys are short on time today. I'm happy to chat if you want at a later
We
time.
may ask you to come back because we're gonna ask the department to come back with their proposal. So why don't we pick this up again? I apologize. We left we have too many questions and we are too engaged and excited about this. We also need to find out if we are able to use eminent domain in this capacity, and that's in Cam's hands to find out who we should talk to from our legislative council point of view. I don't know if it's O'Grady or whoever it is, or Damien. And so we need to find out what's in our own statutes, David.
Yes.
Okay.
We need to find out what's possible in our own statute.
Limited.
It's limited. I know it is. So
So,
we will take this up again next week. If we could we'll work with Heidi to figure out Sean's timing and your timing and Cam's. So thank you all. This was great. And Peter, is there any last parting idea, Jim, that you want to tickle us
yes.
with?
Something to think about, or this is the litmus test. If you have or see a blighted, obsolete, derelict, contaminated site in your community, nothing happening, that's why you need a land bank, period.
Right. Thank you. And
Good.
we really appreciate this. Thank you so much. This is exciting. And actually, this is all exciting. Great opportunities on all fronts, because that's why we created this Vermont Housing Improvement Program to address vacant, blighted, non-code compliant properties, to bring them back online, low-hanging fruit in our housing market. And we wish we could spend a lot more money on it. Just channeling David Weeks before he says. So thank you so much. We're really grateful, and more to follow.
Enjoy your weekend. I'll look
And we
forward to talking
thank
to you.
Kate Lally for this too.
Okay. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thank you. More to follow. And thank you. So if you'd also find out who we need to talk to about eminent domain.
All right.
Sean, more to follow, but it sounds like you're okay with the changes the House made, except maybe on the land bank thing, which we'll discuss.
Yeah.
That is an
Happy
unfinished
to come back.
business.
We are very excited about it too. And we've been working with Jim.
Yeah.
Jim has been so gracious with his time with us, and with Jamie Bauer, who is part of my team now. And she actually hails from Cuyahoga County, which created the first land bank in the country,
And is that Michigan?
Ohio.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, happy to come back. I'm actually out of the office next Tuesday, but
other than that,
I will,
Okay, maybe next Friday.
all right.
Next Tuesday, we're pretty booked.
Okay.
But next Friday.
Happy to come back, and I'll follow up with some written thoughts.
Great.
Yes.
And Jim, I think, is going to get us some more data, which will be particularly great. Great. Thank you so much. This was quite exciting. I love Fridays that send us into the weekend with just jazz to think
And
about
work.
all the things we
And-
So thank you very much. And we're going to, Becky is right behind you. So we lost one legislative council to Department of Labor, and now we have him back. And now we have our legislative council who has left us for the treasurer's office. It's good to have you back, Becky.
Good to be here.
What I think, if it's possible, we would love an update. I'm not sure we need, and you're gonna help us on this. I'm not sure how much legislative action we need to do on baby bonds, Vermont saves. I know credit score reporting is still an issue that I would like very much, if we can, to include in our housing bill this year. Because I do think it will help renters build their credit score if we can figure out a good landing place so that it's positive and works well for us. So, Beck, welcome.
Becky Wasserman, State Treasurer's Office. So I think if we're short on time, I don't know if you want me to bring up the
We're not-
presentation.
We're
but I
not
can-
short on time. You have
Okay.
until 10:30.
Okay, great. Do you need me to put it up on the screen if you all?
We have it right here. What do
Okay.
people want? I think we're okay. Whatever you'd like. Yeah, put it on the screen. I think for people who are watching, if you're watching, we're doing this for you.
Sorry, you said put it on.
Yeah, why not? I
I
mean,
just sent a new link.
I knew, yeah, I was having trouble with the other one.
Yes, I think I mixed up Thursday and Fridays like usual.
David, I thought that testimony would excite you. Yeah.
We had land banks, but I guess not statewide, which is like.
We didn't have them say, and I think his point is really good. That the diversity around the state, of the diversity of resources is significant, and to be able to have one entity.
It's amazing though, his data point about 2,000 in
2,600.
or 2,600 in the whole state.
Well, but
Shocked that we have such a much larger inventory.
it's good. You, okay?
Yeah, I just have to.
Yeah.
Well, that was exciting, and if you see Kate before I do, would you please thank her, Thomas?
Oh, sure.
Because
And I did have a housing group the other day do a update. They did a count and it's 3,000 in Rockland County. I thought that was
wow.
uh,
And so what's the qualifier for them? What, distressed, dilapidated?
stressed, dilapidated, uninhabitable.
Because that's a wide range. It would be interesting to see there's this criteria.
Let's dig it into.
Okay.
So the treasurer's office had proposed some legislative changes for Vermont Saves and baby bonds, and I will go over those briefly.
Are those in this committee or are they in finance?
They're in appropriations proposed in the budget, but we wanted to.
Great, update us.
Update
even though they-
you
Okay.
on it. And for Vermont Saves, some of the changes sort of, the program is in operation now. And so I thought it would be helpful to just try to quickly go through how the program is operating to explain why we want the changes that we're requesting. And then for the third piece, I don't have anything in my presentation on it. It is something that we submitted a report to the legislature to last in December.
On baby bond,
On the positive rental payment reporting.
right. But
So there was language that I think which council had drafted in response to our report. So I don't have necessarily an update other than what the language was that we had worked on, but I'm happy to touch on
let's
that.
just touch base with it.
Yeah.
Because I think we had a lot of discussion about it, and I'm not sure we found a landing spot that both, right. Okay, go for it.
Great. So first I'll talk about Vermont Saves. I'm just putting up our logo. That's something we worked on in the fall. So just as a reminder, the legislature passed the Vermont Saves enabling legislation in 2023. I was here to work on that, I remember.
Yeah.
And the program requires that all employers with 5 or more employees in the state, and that means all employees who have W-2 income attributable to the state of Vermont. If they do not offer a workplace retirement plan, and they've been in business for the past 2 years, and they are required to register with the Vermont Saves program to enroll their employees. In terms of employees who are eligible, they must be 18 years old and have a social security number or an individual taxpayer identification number, an ITIN. And those are federal law requirements, because what we're doing with the program is offering a Roth IRA account, and those are requirements necessary to open that type of account.
Just in how many businesses, there may be many businesses that fall under this criteria? How many have actually registered at this point?
I can jump to that, but I do
Oh,
have
sorry.
that
No,
in there.
no, right. I'm sorry.
So I will say that the way we determined who was eligible for this program was working with the Department of Labor. We got a list of all the businesses that had unemployment insurance. And from there, we filtered that down to any business that had at least 5 employees at one point during the calendar year. The information was a little bit old because at the time we gathered it, the most recent information they had was end of calendar year 2023. But this is an annual process that we'll go through, so we'll be continuing to update that information. And from there, from that list, what we did is we searched through anyone who had filed a Form 5500, which would allow us to determine if they had a workplace retirement plan. It's not a perfect filtering down because it doesn't account for some workplace retirement plans like a Simple or a SEP, but it gave us a pretty good list. So we had somewhere around 7,000 employees that were invited to register into the program. And I can explain the numbers further.
And how many businesses?
Sorry, employers and 7,000 employers.
7,000 employees seems pretty small.
Yeah, so 7,000 employers that were invited into the program.
Before you move on,
Yeah.
a little feedback from the field. Constituents are very upset that it's opt-out only. That they're all of a sudden they experienced a decrease in their salary. They had to go back to the employer to figure out what happened. And it's because everyone's automatically opted in. And I'm wondering if the treasurer's office has looked at shifting this to opt-in.
So it's a great question. The way the program is structured, even by legislation, is an opt-out program. And it mirrors, so it's the state auto IRA program that we have mirrors every other state auto IRA program in the country. So there are 11 operating right now. And if
I get it that it mirrors something else, and it's the way it's written. I get that, but people were a bit upset out there because it wasn't well articulated that this was going to hit. It hit. Then they had to figure out what happened, and then they had to opt out.
Right.
And that's a whole series of.
It was a whole schmagaggy. I think that we talked about this in GovOps, and I think there's some marketing work that is going on to rectify that problem. Because you're right, it was sadly a bit of too much of a surprise for people without them having appreciated this was coming an opportunity.
But we've also created a program which requires every Vermont employee that falls into these categories to then have to do something to get out of it they don't desire, as opposed to understanding the program and then signing up to participate. And I think it's field experience is now that it's a wrong-headed approach. That's just
yeah. So I think that's not something that we're considering changing. I don't think that we could operate the program the other way. I think data shows that automatic enrollment is sort of how you get participation in these programs. And we are also, we won't get to, I can talk about it now. We're also part of a multi-state consortium so we are, we are part of a consortium with the states of Colorado, Delaware, Maine, and Nevada is joining as well. And so this is a feature of our consortium. But I would also add that so the federal government is actually requiring an automatic, like an opt-out requirement for private plans as well in Secure 2.0. So any 401k that has been adopted past, I believe, 2022 is now going to be required to have the same automatic enrollment. So this program is actually really just mirroring what is happening in the private market and what is a federal requirement.
And may I just add, I think it is viewed that people having savings is a public good and a reduction on the impact on the pressure on the public purse, David, which is part of why we had done this as an opt-out. I mean, this is, too many Vermonters have nothing. And we've heard this testimony, too many Vermonters have less than like $1,000 if there's a crisis. And it was viewed by the enacting committees and by the legislature that this served the public good of enabling savings, building savings, and reducing public dependency as a result. Thomas and then Randy.
Could you describe the opt-out process? I'd hope it'd be relatively straightforward.
It is,
easy.
it is, and I can just jump to that now if you.
I'm sorry to do
Was that-
Yeah, no, it's okay. So, basically how it works is that, you know, I can just. Go to that.
There's,
For new
Line.
hires, is it very clear that they get a chance when they're newly hired to just say, I don't want to do this?
Yes,
Okay.
so the way it works is employers register on our website, they get a notification from us. If they have provided an email address to the Department of Labor as their way of being contacted, we would contact them that way. If they did not, we sent a letter in the mail that explained how you go to register for the program. Once they have registered their employees, there is they do nothing from there. So they sign up their employees and then there's a 30-day wait period. And in that 30-day period, an employee gets 3 communications from our program, and they are communicated to in the way that the employer has provided their information. So employer provides their email address and their mailing address. And they say, you have been enrolled in the program because they have, because it's an automatic enrollment. But here's what you can do. You can opt out. You can stay in the program and you will have the default like provisions that the default investment and contribution rate, which I will talk about in a second, or you can customize. And so it's pretty clear, and we communicate with them 3 times. After that 30-day period, if they have done nothing, and when I say opt out, they have to go to the portal. They're given the portal link. They put in their name and their social security number, and then they just click opt out. So it's not a like a huge time consuming process.
I'm just thinking of my father-in-law, and that just seems bewildering to him.
So
Okay.
there's also a way to call
Okay.
to do it. So
The thing is that everyone has to do all this process to get out, as opposed to making a conscious choice to go in.
right, but we made that choice with the
We made that
legislature.
choice for them, but now the reaction program's hot, it's live. Reaction is, what the heck's going on in Montpelier? What happened here?
But unlike you, I've heard nothing. I have not had one person email me about
I've
that.
heard only negative.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Very upset accountants who are taking care of books for, a variety of businesses and such, and they're very upset. This just landed on top of them like a ton of bricks. Anyway, I understand the whole,
Yeah.
the benefit of this.
Randy.
Do any states have an opt-in program?
The state of Maryland has, it's a program where you get, a credit, I think it's a tax credit. Frankly, it's not working, and they have language in their legislature right now to make it an opt-out because nobody is signing up for it.
Okay, that's not surprising.
So, we, I think based on evidence-based research and data on this, it shows that, people are 15 times more likely to save for retirement if they are offered a plan through their workplace. And, we have spent a lot of time doing outreach, continue to appreciate feedback, try to communicate with all the stakeholders. We've done a lot with the CPA Association. We did a ton of webinars for a number of different industry groups in the fall. We were at conferences. We went to chambers of commerce. We've been doing a lot of marketing and social media outreach. And we're going to continue to do that. And now that we have more information about who's enrolling in the program, we are also going to do more sort of targeted outreach based on that.
In states that have this requirement, is there any litigation that you're aware of?
I think so the first state to do this was Oregon, and I don't want to misstate when they did this. I think it was maybe around 2018. I think they had some litigation at the time around ERISA, but it ended up, being resolved. And so I'm not aware of any other litigation. I have monthly meetings with all of the state directors, actually meetings twice a month with all of them, and meet with the rest of the directors in my consortium every other week. So we're pretty like on top of how things are going. And for the states that have been doing this,
So,
a year into it, it's, I think there's this like initial enrollment period where there might be some, what is this? But then it becomes very normalized.
so it's Colorado, Maine, Oregon.
Who have operating programs.
Yeah.
California, Oregon, Colorado, Illinois, Maryland, Delaware, Maine,
Yeah.
Virginia, Rhode Island, Connecticut. Rhode Island just joined a partnership with Connecticut.
So a significant number of states are moving towards.
Yeah, Nevada and Minnesota is starting one. Hawaii is starting one. So there's I think there's over 20 states that have legislation for it right now.
And does this apply only to private employees and employers? For example, to state and municipal employees?
They're exempt
They're exempt.
because they're offered a
They're offered a very good program. That's what we're doing with our retirement monies, which are significant. Yeah, Dave.
I just want to make sure they didn't start.
No, no.
So if I looked at this overview slide, I would think that we as legislators are also would be in this program. You say no because we're offered a pension plan.
Nope.
But in fact, we're not offered a pension plan.
because
So are
you're
we-
considered state government employees, I believe.
Right, so why are we?
We're a complicated mess.
It's not, sorry, I should say the exemption is for government employees. It's not for, it's government employees and then anyone who's like already offered a
is
plan out of work.
It's a fair statement
It's a
because
fair
we do
statement,
not
yes.
receive any benefits, just for the public to know. We receive no payment when we're not in this building.
Well, there are also.
And
employees
receive no benefit.
Of state government.
Nice license plates.
There are some categories of employees of state government who don't. They're not eligible for the benefit because of either limited service or other.
No, they get retirement. They get a retirement benefit. We get nothing. So it is a good question because we are considered state employees. That's what it says
So
somewhere. So a good question.
you all drafted the exemptions, but I would say that that
Statement.
that if an individual can voluntarily participate in the program, it's just a self-enrollment process. So rather than getting, so the sort of benefit of this is that if you do it through your workplace, it's a deduction from your paycheck. If you
Without being paid. I mean,
it's a Roth IRA, so it's
Yeah.
post-tax. But if you self-enroll, then you would just get deductions made through your bank account. So you would just need to sort of input your bank account information and get whatever amount you want taken out.
something for us to consider. Why don't you finish? Because
Sure.
Michael's got a really tight time frame.
Just quickly, this is just talking about the defaults that, after that 30-day period, if you stay in, you're first put into a capital preservation fund for 30 days, which is like a money market fund. So that's sort of another opportunity for you to say, I don't want to be part of this program. And I do want to reiterate, you can opt out or opt in at any time to the program. So the defaults for the program are 5% of your gross wages automatically deducted. There's a auto escalation provision that allows the treasurer to auto escalate that 5% default 1% per year up to a maximum of 8%. And then if you do nothing after you're in that capital preservation fund, you're moved to the target date suite of fund based on your retirement age that gets more conservative over time and as you get closer to retirement.
And before we leave this escalation, what is considered with a person who is contributing to their savings? It is recommended. I thought 10% was recommended.
It's actually, and that's one of the changes we want. So, you know, I can, so it's actually 15%.
So yeah, it's so if your eyebrows are going up at 8%, it's actually just like I mean, it is standard practice to encourage people to be saving 10 to 15% of their income
Yes.
for savings.
So one of the things we wanted to change was to increase the auto escalation to 10%. Again,
Maybe we wait until this program's up and going.
well,
Wow.
this wouldn't be put, you know, this is, right now we're at 5, so it's 1% per year. But we want to be in line with the other programs in our consortium. And also, again, this is a requirement of Secure 2.0 for private plans. So this is a federal requirement now that actually those private 401k plans, I think, have a minimum auto escalation to 10%, but can go up to 15%.
Yeah.
So it's opt-out only. And it's after the initial year, it automatically increases 1% per year.
Which is, you can not do.
You can opt out of that too. You can
You
keep
can
it.
do all kinds of stuff, but it has to be, you have to be aware, then you actually have to do it. It just
Right.
seems like
I
I
think
struggle
struggle
with that.
important to highlight that it's a Roth IRA, so they can withdraw these.
They can withdraw at any point without
Yeah.
I
punishment.
get that too.
Yeah.
I get that.
There, yeah, so,
But I take your point. I think of my father-in-law getting really frustrated if they started taking it out of his salary and asking him to do a portal.
Yeah. What? So what you said, there's 20 states roughly in the program, overall consortium right now. Those 20 states, is that correct?
in our consortium, there's not 20 states. There are 11 operating states. We have, 5 in our consortium. The other ones are operating independently except for,
There's 20 states with the concept,
and then
similar
there's,
programs.
yeah, there's more either in some stage of legislation of it having recently passed and not yet launched.
So 20 states is not enough people to do opt-in only? I mean, it just seems like a huge pool of potential investors.
They're operating separately for their, like although we're in a consortium, we operate separately just for, we only have Vermont savers in our,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so in terms of dates, we launched our pilot program in October of last year. The program open date was in December 1st of last year, and the sort of official enrollment end date was the end of February. We are now in a sort of post-enrollment, sending out reminders to those businesses that have not sort of interacted with us in some way. Right now, as of we get weekly updates every Monday, so this information might be a little bit old, but we had 1,622 funded accounts. That's 1,622 employees who have decided to stay in the program and have funded their accounts. We have the amount of assets under management. There are over 1,000 employers who have registered, and that unregistered rate is the combination of both employers who have registered and those who have exempted themselves. And the exemption process is pretty simple. It's just kind of clicking a box to certify your exemption. That could be maybe they no longer have 5 employees or they offer a plan.
So this is the employers who have chosen
Yeah.
not to participate?
Because maybe we sent a notification to them inadvertently, maybe the data we had said they had 5 employees, you know, as of the end of 2023, they don't right now, or maybe since then they've started a plan. So we have, you know, almost a 53% response rate from the number of employers that were invited, which is actually pretty good.
I think it's very good.
A lot of the states sort of a year in are sort of more in the 70% range. So I think we're actually just being 3 months in, having a pretty good response rate. And people are kind of getting their communications for sending, and we have a number of plans to continue our outreach to those folks.
Yeah, right.
Just, I mean, I think I heard, but I just want to double check of the number of people who have opted out compared to the number of people who have continued the plan. Do you know that?
Oh, are the employees?
Employees, yes.
I do, but I would have to stop my
Okay,
sharing.
I'll
to-
come back.
I can,
Yeah.
at the end, I can give you that information.
Yeah, so I think that's the other thing we'd love to know, particularly going to David's concern, is how many employees offered this opportunity have chosen to continue and stay in it and
Yeah,
versus opt out.
yeah, I can stop sharing for a second, just look that up.
Oh, okay, great. Because, I mean, I can see why an employer, I mean, for employers who don't offer retirement saving benefits, it's a great way for them to enable their employees to obviously participate in this program. And so I think it just will be interesting for us to see what, looking at the number.
Start shaking if I don't get caffeine at a regular interval. I was just really.
Put you on a drip. Put you on a drip.
Yeah.
Oh, something yummy. Or the Navy still offering goodies upstairs?
Still free stuff.
What?
Yep, there's still free stuff.
Yeah, so we're just about 25 to 30%, which I think is similar to what other programs, I think we're right in line with what we're seeing in other
25 or 30% of what?
opting out.
25 to 30%.
But,
Yeah, so-
but only half of the employers are registered, or half of the employees are registered.
We have 53% of employers who have responded to our notification that you are required to register. So that response might be to either have registered or to let us know that they actually don't need to comply because they don't meet the requirements under the law.
And I understand the program is for 5 employees or greater. You said you have 1,600 funded accounts right now, and there's 1,030 registered employers. It's like 1.6 employees per employer. I don't know, the math just, it doesn't seem like it's catching on.
So there may be many
1,600.
who have set up their own savings already.
Yeah, it could also be that you don't do this program because you have another Roth IRA. I mean, there's many reasons why, but I think we have the number of opt-out actions. So
And we actually, now that we have people's emails, there's an opportunity to ask why, I mean, to survey and to see how can we can even ask them, how can we make this program work better? I think that in GovUp, we also asked for sort of an improved marketing notification because we've ended enrollment, but actually we don't have a lot of people, as many people as it would be great to have enrolled. So I can see opening it up again with more marketing. Are you thinking of doing that?
yeah, we are continuing. I mean, yes, we will sort of have an annual open enrollment. I should also say that,
Because employees
number-
change, it always
Yeah.
changes a lot.
and the numbers you have to keep in mind, like right now we have 1,300 employees in that pending 30-day window. So because there is this 30-day lag from when people sign up to then if they stay in the program, a deduction is not made until the employer's next payroll period, which could be another 2 weeks after that. So the counts we're seeing right now are actually people who are maybe only enrolled like at the end of February, because there could be like
So are you saying that there are 1,300 additional to the 1,622? That
are in that pending. I don't know what they'll choose to do, but I'm saying there's a lag to the numbers that you're seeing
Got it.
because because there could be a 4 to 6 week period from when
But-
people
but-
are enrolled to when their account is actually
Got it.
funded.
But I think what I hear you saying is that there may be over 2,900 people actually enrolled by the end of this.
If all those people chose to stay in the program, I don't know what their action will be, but yes, there's more. So that could be why there's this, the employers have registered, but not all the employees haven't had their 30-day decision
Got it.
period
So,
has not ended yet.
so the employers have had greater time to engage and make decisions greater than the employees. So we don't yet fully know on the employees how many. Got it. Okay. Great.
Can you go back to your comment? How many people, you don't have savings? What was that percentage? You had a good number you threw out.
We estimate that 40% of Vermonters
Yeah.
don't have access to a workplace retirement plan.
Right.
Okay, so how many employees is that? Roughly, just to get a sense of what you
Employees,
think is saturation.
we thought it was somewhere, our estimates have ranged somewhere around like 75 to 85,000. It's hard to entirely know.
There are 312 roughly thousand people in the workforce. So if you're taking 40% of that, that's a lot of people. And I think the public good involved here is that the more people save on their own and are able to survive and weather challenging moments, the less pressure on the public purse. Quite honestly, it's a very conservative argument. And I think that is what fueled a lot of this. That and the stark concern that so many people have so little in their savings accounts that when anything goes wrong, they have little to fall back on. So I think this was at its best designed as a really strong public good, supporting an important public good. So I think that there's room for improvement. There's no question, because if people are surprised, that means they either haven't been reading or not getting the marketing work that the treasurer's office has put out there. And we all know how well the treasurer markets things because we hear from him all the time. So I think is a concern we do need to address. GovOps, David addressed this and tried to reinforce exactly what David is suggesting, that as we try and continue getting employees enrolled and engaged, I think it's important for us to reach out again and again with all the benefits of why it's staying.
And I can say we are weekly thinking about this. We have, thought about other state agencies to kind of partner with to get the information out. We recently with my former colleague, David Hall at the Secretary of State's office to get information about Vermont Saves to the business corporation so that employers, so it's part of what employers know when they start business in the state. So, we're doing a lot to think about marketing to both and doing outreach to both employers and employees on this.
Part-time employees?
You are eligible as a part-time seasonal temporary employee if you work more than 500 hours in a calendar year.
And that's how.
Yeah, if they're just considered employees for the definition.
So you're asked, because I want us to have a
Yes.
5-minute break. I need to go.
Yeah.
I think we all need to stand up and
Yeah,
Michael Chernick, we need to take up the resolution fairly promptly.
Yeah.
So could you, I hate to ask, but we need to.
I will be quick with our asks. So in statute, the name of the program is VT Saves, and we would like to change it to Vermont Saves because
Yeah.
that is how we end.
So that's an approach. That's a request.
Right now, the statute says that you default to opening a Roth IRA when you open this account, and you may convert that to a traditional IRA. We want to change that to allow for an account holder to have both a Roth and a traditional. And the reason is because at federal level, there's what's called the Savers Match in Secure 2.0, which is going to be a new match for.
Oh, so they'd have even more.
Well, right now, the way it's structured is that you are eligible for the match if you have contributed to your Roth IRA, but the government will not put the match into a Roth IRA. They will only put it into a traditional. So we don't want the savers in our program to miss out on that match opportunity.
Who's matching?
The
Federal government.
It still default to a Roth.
It defaults to a Roth,
You can
but you
choose a Roth
could
instead.
choose to also open a traditional so that you could, get this match.
What's the match amount?
It is a maximum match is $1,000 per person if for, a maximum up to
For year.
per year for up to $2,000 contributed, but there are income thresholds.
But that's nice. And you're wanting to modify, you already talked about, and amend the eligibility criteria for employers.
Yeah, so right now the statute says that you only are eligible as an employer to enroll if you had a plan within the past 2 years. We have gotten some sort of feedback from employers who maybe 2 years ago had a plan and then it dissolved, or they no longer had that plan, so they weren't sure if they could enroll in Vermont Saves. So we wanted to change the language to say that if you do not currently offer a plan, then you can enroll in the program.
Got it. Thank you. This is great. I'm going to ask you back for the credit score stuff, and if you could be prepared to discuss that, because I want to put that back on the table. I mean,
Sure.
it's not been off the table. We just didn't include it in our first housing bill. But I think there are enough of us who are very keen on helping renters build their credit score. So I think that if we can figure out a way to do it and land it together, that we want to do that. So Heidi will be in touch for do that. I'm going to give us 5 minutes because we need to start again with Michael Chernick, who has a hard stop at 11:20. Okay, thank you. We'll go off live and